Good morning from cloudy Ann Arbor today, and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the Understanding International Admissions Trends, Decoding the Global Application Process event. My name is Unja Yu, Senior Director of International Alumni Engagement and Communications. I have the privilege to work with our amazing alumni communities all over the world, and I'm also a proud LSA grad from the 20th century. Once international travel resumes, I look forward to seeing many of you in person. Now I'd like to just share a quick housekeeping items that I know you've all heard at least several hundred times by now in almost 2 years. Zoom auto captioning will be used throughout this event. To view the captions, please click on closed caption at the bottom of your screen and then choose show subtitle. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature to ask questions. To use the Q&A feature, please type your question in the Q&A window at any time during the event, and our wonderful and distinguished colleagues will answer your questions. Now, it is my great pleasure to welcome a good friend of the Alumni Association, Vikram Pulavarapu. Vikram received a Master's of Engineering in Manufacturing from the College of Engineering in Tauber at the University of Michigan. He is currently a member of the International Alumni Advisory Committee for the Alumni Association here at Michigan. Vikram is also a principal at Aryabhata Ventures, an infrastructure firm that is into real estate development, construction, and logistics parks, as well as a principal at Gitanjali Investments, an angel investment firm focusing on food and healthcare sectors. Please welcome Vikram.
Good morning, or good evening, as the case may be in my part of the world. Thank you, Unja, for the introduction. I believe that every person goes through 5 life-changing experiences. My time at Michigan is second on that list. I have great memories from the classrooms to tailgating to the games at the football stadium. Having said that, there are lots of people like myself that are constantly, they're trying really hard to get into a school like Michigan. Last year, I believe the university received over 75,000 applications. With record-setting numbers of this magnitude, I can't wait to hear what our panelists have to say about the international admission trends. And now I am pleased to introduce Steve Grafton, the President and CEO of the Alumni Association of the University of Michigan. Since 1994, Steve has provided leadership and direction to the association across all Michigan campuses. He is a national leader in the educational advancement field, serving many leadership roles for the Council for Advancement and Support of Education. Steve and I met several years ago at an alumni event in Mumbai. I kind of steered him from the kebab section to the street food section during our lunch buffet, and I guess he was happy enough with what he had that he made a mention of me in his opening remarks. And since then, we've been good friends, watching many a football game together. On a personal note, Steve and his wife, Carol, have 2 sons who are Michigan alumni. Steve Grafton, welcome.
Thank you, Vikram. What a nice introduction, and it is true that you and I became immediate friends, and it's been a great friendship. And I miss being there and getting some of that delicious food right there where it's the best. And here in Ann Arbor, it's fairly early this morning. We especially for those of us that stayed up last night to watch the unfortunate loss in basketball, our team, which is ranked in the top, well, the 4th ranked team in the nation, lost a close one last night, but it was a great game, and this is a great team. I am especially interested in hearing about today's topic too, and so I welcome all of you alumni who are joining us from all over the world. We have people literally from many countries, well over 120 people that are participating this morning, or at least that registered to participate. And we look forward to being able to share with you and to keep our relationship going, even during these times when it's difficult. Like everybody else, or like everything else, I should say, I think, college admissions has undergone tremendous change in the past few years. When I started at Michigan, about 1 out of every 5 applicants ended up being a student here at Michigan. Now that number is about 1 in 12. And so it has really changed the way admissions happens here. We still look for the leaders and best, but it's more challenge for our team. One statistic that hasn't changed is that every Michigan alum with a high school senior believes that their child is the most deserving to be admitted. And so I get to talk with many of those, and I'm sure there are a number of you that are on the call, and that's appropriate. We're really glad to be able to provide this service to you too, I hope, this morning. And we've asked a team to join us who are really expert in these issues. And I'll start by introducing the moderator, Erica Sanders. Erica, who's also a friend, is the director for the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of Michigan. And in that role, she oversees a number of functions related to the undergraduate admissions procedures, including recruiting, admitting, enrolling students, and always with a goal to put together a class that reflects the socioeconomic and racial diversity of the state of Michigan, certainly, and also of our nation. So during her 25 years at the University of Michigan, she's served in a variety of student service areas, including student orientation, diversity facilitation, and academic advising. She's a true leader on our campus. Erica's a native of Detroit, and most importantly, a Michigan grad. Please join me in welcoming our director of the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, Erica Sanders.
Good morning. Thank you, Steve. Welcome, everyone. It's good to be with you today. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you more about what's going on in our world, specifically in college admissions. We're delighted to speak with you to discuss the ever-changing landscape of global admissions and to share information about the global landscape and contextual information about the University of Michigan, and specifically highly selective admission to colleges and universities. We value the experiences that you share as Michigan alumni, and more importantly, as you've conveyed that to your students, we know that that is invaluable. We also know that as it relates to college admissions, and specifically at Michigan, as Steve mentioned, given the volume of Michigan alumni, recognizing we have the largest alumni population in the world, that the experience is the most important piece that you are able to convey to your students. However, in the world of college admissions, it simply tells us about your students' love and interest in the institution, but is not something that we're able to track as it relates to their interest in the institution. We appreciate all of you who submitted questions in advance. We were incorporating the responses in the questions that are pre-prepared, and I'll ask our panelists. And then there will be a time later in the conversation for you to submit questions if something comes to mind during the presentation. We will provide links in the chat or as we can regarding some of your questions that may be more procedural, specifically information about any of our guidelines or how credit might be awarded. We'll be distributing information as we move through the program. Now to the important people. I'm going to introduce our panelists. And I'd like to start by introducing my boss and a good friend. She's new to our campus, but certainly is not new to the profession nor to the world of global education and higher education and admissions. Adele C. Brumfield is the Vice Provost for Enrollment Management at the University of Michigan. She's a first-generation college graduate and has spent more than 25 years promoting the power of higher education to students across the United States and around the world. Adele joined us just this past August and is acclimated to our recent snowstorm that we had. Well, I call it a snowstorm, given that it was in November earlier this week. Prior to joining U of M, Adele was the Associate Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Management at the University of California, San Diego from 2016 to 2021. During her tenure at UC San Diego, she led record-breaking application growth, topping 140,000 applications in the year 2020, which ranked second highest in the nation. So she is not a stranger to large application volumes and highly competitive admissions. She participates on an advisory committee and has traveled the world in support of the College Board's Overseas Schools Project, which is funded by the U.S. Department of State. The primary mission of the OSP program is to promote quality education for dependents of those carrying out the programs of the U.S. government living abroad. She was appointed also as a member of the Test of English as a Foreign Language, or the TOEFL board, for a 4-year term, and serves as the chair for 2 years as well. She is a native of the Midwest of Wisconsin, and was a director of admissions at Wisconsin, but also has served in admissions positions at the University of Chicago, Denison University, and Marquette. She is highly regarded in our field, and we are delighted to have her. She earned a BA in speech with a major in broadcast communication at Marquette and a MA in telecommunications from Michigan State University. Welcome, Vice Provost. Mike Solomon is the Dean of Rackham Graduate School and the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, Graduate Studies at the University of Michigan. A member of the Michigan faculty since 1997, he is a professor of chemical engineering and a professor of macromolecular science and engineering. Mike has served Rackham in various leadership roles since 2013 and has been dean since 2018. He received a BS in chemical engineering and economics from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and his PhD in chemical engineering from the University of California, Berkeley. Welcome to you both. Recent articles have highlighted the impact of the pandemic on the international educational landscape. Certainly there were declines in enrollment due to the inability to travel, virtual learning, and health concerns. But the good news is that things are looking much better. We'd like to start specifically by talking about the University of Michigan, recognizing that we know that the university provides an outstanding educational opportunity, and now we know it's highly adaptable given the constraints that were put in place, and is highly sought after and in demand. I'd like to start by asking our panelists a few questions. And our first question really is, let's start by addressing the current state of admissions now in November 2021. At a national and institutional level, specifically enrollment trends. Are apps up? Are they down or about the same? And we'll start with Vice Provost Brumfield.
Thank you, Director Sanders, and good morning, Wolverines, wherever you happen to be. It's great to address you, and I look forward to engaging in this important topic. I'm going to take the liberty and not address the question just yet, because when we're talking about what's happening now, it's just so important to remind ourselves of where we were a year ago. And I want to let you know how grateful I am that it's November 2021 and not November 2020, because we've come so far. And while we're not out of the pandemic, things have significantly improved. A year ago, we were talking about global testing still being disrupted. We were talking about students in schools who were struggling with different modalities, or schools just shutting down, students concerned about how grading was happening and how colleges and universities would perceive that. In admissions offices, we were trying to figure out, how do we make sense of these new records that students were submitting to us? How did we think about maybe new ways of incorporating or not using testing? And I'll talk a little bit more about that a bit later. And just generally, the world just seemed like it was turned on its head. And so even during the course of this pandemic in 2020, you heard about the record-breaking applications that we received a year ago. And so that's really a testament to the ingenuity of Erica Sanders and her team, where they had over 1,000 virtual programs. They really tried to reach students more individually. We stood up things that we hadn't done before, really expanding students' ability to see the campus, even if they never set foot on the campus. And so we learned a lot from the global pandemic, and some of those things continue today. So fast forward, it is November 17th. Our first application deadline has passed, our early application deadline, early action, and it was November 1st, and our applications aren't looking so bad. They look pretty good, which is really to be expected, given who we are and our position in the global market. So applications, I'd say overall, are a little bit up for early. We're not sure how they'll land for the entire year, because we have one more deadline coming up on February 1st. The other thing, though, I'd like to just say is we are in such a poised position within American higher education. You may be reading articles that talk about other universities in the US who've not been so fortunate, where they've struggled with applications, their enrollment has declined, they're really struggling to even restart and get classes back going. That is not our position. We're really fortunate here. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike to see what else he'd like to add.
Thank you, Vice Provost. Really delighted to be here as well. And I think before I address the up and the down, let me talk about some of the constants in the graduate education space. And so to add to these comments, University of Michigan is one of its leadership positions is that it's a comprehensive institution and it's also a research institution. And so graduate and professional degrees are really fundamental to that way of how we think about the University of Michigan. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about our graduate and professional degrees and some of the trends, how they have played out in these very important programs. For those of you that are less familiar with this, there's 18,000 currently graduate and professional students at the University of Michigan. If your interest on this call is around undergraduate, I would ask you to kind of just look into the long term, in that a lot of aspirations for careers of young individuals include graduate and professional degrees. And so it may well be a step on the path for students. And so within that, I'm the Dean of the Graduate School, and we have the research degrees at the University of Michigan. So that would be in addition to outside Rackham, the Master of Public Health, the Master of Social Work, the MBA, professional doctorates. These are the research intensive degrees, the Master of Science and Engineering, the PhD degree, the Master of Arts. And here is a tremendous opportunity to join the University of Michigan. It is a very large enterprise, just as the undergraduate admission space is, not quite at the scale that my colleague has, but we received 20,000 international applications last year. And it is very selective. There's financial aid that's available, especially in the PhD space. But in terms of career development for students that have an interest in research, this is a tremendous opportunity to take advantage of what University of Michigan has to offer. And international students are extremely well represented among our graduate and professional degrees. Focusing just for a moment on the Rackham Graduate School that I represent, 40% of Rackham students are international. They call from 100 countries, and that's a point of particular pride for us. For us to have the research enterprise that is vibrant in the way that we want as an institution, we require just the range of brilliance and breadth that that come globally. And so whatever country you're coming from, really delighted to see the number of individuals from different countries on the call. It's very important to us. Turning to the trends, just as in the undergraduate space, travel restrictions and consular closures did severely disrupt our enrollment last year, but we are delighted that enrollment has recovered this year. Students were able to get their visas, arrive, and begin their studies. And so enrollment did decline last year, and now we're back above trend. And one reason we're above trend is that students, this is some of the supports we were able to offer at the University of Michigan. Students that deferred their admission last year have now started this year. And so we're really delighted that we've been able to kind of move through that challenging period. And students that needed to defer their educational opportunities for a year, they're here now and they're doing great. Just to give you a sense of our commitment to international students, let me talk just a little bit about some of the supports we offered during the pandemic, just as a sense of how invested we were in seeing our global students. In addition to the really very useful possibilities of being able to defer enrollment, we also set up ways that students in doctoral programs were able to start their studies from abroad and begin their appointments just as all students virtually. And so that involved some of their employment opportunities as graduate student instructors, graduate research assistants, all that was able to start. And we had tremendous support from the university to make that work. That was in addition to all the regular pre-arrival support we have, so that students here that are making their first transition to the University of Michigan feel well supported. We have graduate student organizations at Rackham that also create a place for inclusion and community because international graduate students find home in all our doctoral and master's degrees and in every program in humanities and the arts, in social sciences, in the biological and health sciences, and physical sciences and engineering. And that is really a strength of all research institutions, but one at University of Michigan in particular. So I think there'll be more to say. Let me stop there and turn things back over to Erica. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Solomon. Taking a step back just a little bit to go in and dive a little bit deeper, just wanted to address, we all know that admissions policies and considerations needed to be changed. Simply put, students didn't have access to the same kind of resources, curriculums, testing that they had been in the past. We also recognize that as changes in modality occurred, students didn't have the academic support. And in some ways, depending on the institutions they were attending, some of us transitioned more gracefully than others to provide really remote opportunities for classroom experiences for students. So I'd like to take a step back and just talk a little bit about admissions policies over the last 18 months. Considerations of many elements of the application process, again, were impacted by COVID, including course availability, extracurricular activities at the graduate level, including research and internships or work experience. And some of the course grades and test scores may have looked quite different. How has Michigan adapted, and what did we see in terms of those kinds of considerations? Does this look different for international students? And so I'd like to start with Dean Solomon for this question.
Thanks. So due to the pandemic, as you indicated, a number of features of the application look different. And so our primary support as a graduate school, admissions decisions in graduate and professional schools are in the hands of the faculty. And so applications are being read by faculty members in the program with whom you would be receiving your education. And so we worked very hard to really talk about what was different and how holistic review of all the different dimensions of potential experience and skills of applications can be understood in this very challenging moment. And I think there were really three dimensions that we highlighted where things would look different and not only look different last year, but may look different for a couple of years going ahead as we kind of move through this period. The first would be research and internship experience, understanding that experience that individuals have, applicants have had could be quite different at the moment. Internships might have been virtual, internships might not have been available. So working with admissions committees to understand that part of the application might look different. Students may be bringing forward different kinds of experiences, project work that they did in their classes, remote experiences, and understanding that these are this is the information that is useful to admissions committees. The second would be just to really acknowledge that the ability of many programs are placing less reliance on test scores going forward. And at this moment, acknowledging that many students were not even able to sit for these exams. And so there was broad recognition of this across our more than 100 programs, and really including that in the holistic admissions process and reflecting in not using test scores or using them in a really intentional way, acknowledging the heterogeneity of possibilities that were available to applicants, particularly international applicants. And the last I'll just briefly mention is that some programs did move to different kinds of grading schemes in the moment. And so understanding that the transcript is an important part of the admissions process, and understanding that even the transcripts may look a little bit different at the moment, and that was regular, and that we should really be accommodating that and understanding that some students were receiving COVID grading in this period, and that was entirely regular and needed to be incorporated into holistic admissions. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Provost Brumfield.
Thank you. I think I'd like to pick up on something that Dean Solomon mentioned, and he mentioned holistic. And so I think that is something that really is a hallmark of what we do at the University of Michigan, is that we're looking at students in their entirety. We're not saying they're just a test score or just an extracurricular activity or just a grade on a transcript. we really are taking time with a team of trained professionals to understand who students are, the context of the environments from which they come, the sort of preparation they've had, and how we believe that could translate into our university here, with faculty then picking up once they arrive. So let me dive into that a little bit, and let me share a few things that might be a little bit different than what the dean mentioned. Director Sanders leads a huge team of people whose sole job it is to go out, identify, recruit, and enroll students. And they also are responsible for reading and reviewing those 80,000, nearly 80,000 applications. Every file is read more than one time. So we really take great care, again, in this holistic process to understand who students are. So what do I mean by holistic, and how does that really translate for students who may be in high school or who may be thinking about joining us from a community college or another four-year school and transferring? So it means that we'll start with that transcript. We'll look at the transcript, a record of the choices that students have made, the sort of courses, the level of rigor. Perhaps it may be A-levels, IB, AP. It could be none of that. It could be whatever your high school or your school has designated as a curriculum that moves you through and shows your ability to really tackle new challenges. So that's quite important. We also will look, the dean mentioned standardized testing. We changed our standardized test policy. It became a test flexible policy, understanding, as I mentioned, that testing was disrupted throughout the United States and throughout the world. So it meant that you could send us a test, what you might be able to find, and then you could also decide whether you wanted to use it or whether you wanted to have it be considered as part of the application process. Though for some students, international students who are not studying in an American or a US curriculum, an English curriculum, and there is a long list of places that might not have to take the TOEFL exam or demonstrate English language competency, that would have still been required. We also looked at letters of recommendation from the people who know you, who could talk about what's been going on, how education might have been disrupted, why the grades might look a little bit different in one year versus another year. And then these activities, these extracurriculars. Perhaps someone out there is a basketball player. We heard about the close loss of our team last night. Most teams weren't able to gather. So what were you doing with your time? How might you have been contributing to your community? Did you switch activities? So whatever you were doing, the application allowed for you to tell us about that. But Director Sanders' team understood that it might not have looked exactly the same. So I think as much as things are different, many things in college admission really remain the same, because we're still expecting students to do their best, to stretch themselves. And then also, if there were challenges, using the essays to explain what happened. What did you experience, and how did COVID impact you and your family? Or if you didn't want to talk about that, there were other exciting prompts that students could write to. So as I turn it back over, it's really, as much as things seem to have been totally disrupted and look totally different, they really were the same, maybe just a slightly different flavor.
Thank you both. Just to take a closer dive into it a little bit more, for this particular population, our audience here today, certainly their concerns are about their students, and certainly thinking, as an international student, as we're talking about these application volumes, what does this look like in terms of consideration as it relates to citizenship or, country of origin? Are there specific goals the university has about these kinds of things that could potentially impact their students that they're not aware of? Whether it's do they have dual citizenship, or are they considered a resident of the U.S.? What are the kinds of things that maybe myths out there that they think will impact their students' decision that don't. We all know the mythical student that certainly we always talk about, that rare place where there's one applicant who applies, and we're so excited to have that application from a student that it really doesn't matter what's in the application. We all know that's not true, that we look for the student to be a contributing member of our population, whether it's at the undergrad, graduate, or professional school level, and certainly want to see what that student will contribute. But what are the things as it relates to just thinking about, our international students and regions of the world where we may have larger populations of students who are applying? Certainly our questions that were asked in advance, there was certainly a concern about students from China and Southeast Asia, and how particularly they might be impacted by not only volumes of applications, but also just as it relates to what happens when there are political differences. As an institution, where do we stand? And that also relates to, as we think about shaping our class and who's in our classrooms. And so let's start with Dean Solomon again.
Thank you, Director Sanders. This is a very interesting question, and I think I will connect to one point that Vice Provost Broomfield made around holistic admissions. And I think a hallmark of that is that the file is read individually, that it's the set of potential skills and experience that is really front and center. And I would then intersect that with an earlier comment I made about speaking specifically to what I know best in the graduate in the graduate space, which is that we really seek the breadth of experience and potential and excellence. And it really is represented by the fact that 100 different countries are represented among the population of Rackham graduate students. And so I think our faculty they are looking for that unique dimension, that piece of heterogeneous brilliance that's gonna bring something that is remarkable to the research that we do and the educational experience that the student will receive. But just a good match with the student, the potential student, and our graduate programs. And so I would really just kind of combine those two, just to say that it's just an extremely important way. And some of the boundaries that you could think of around country of origin, around citizenship, these really don't appear at the level of when we really frame this as a holistic review of applications. And just briefly around the piece around welcoming students globally, there was a specific mention of China. This is really something that the University of Michigan has welcomed just to speak for my school, we have welcomed international students from China for well more than 100 years. And this is a source of pride for us. I travel the world to meet you as alums, and this is something that we work really hard to keep the links, the scholarly links, the links of people between countries. And so we make our admissions decisions. We understand that afterwards there's steps around federal immigration policy, but I really want to stress that those are things that happen afterwards. And the first thing we do is going to look at that, look at the application and think in terms of what can this student bring to the University of Michigan, and what can the University of Michigan do for that student. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Provost Brumfield.
Yes, thanks. I appreciate the question, and even the mention of myths, because people make up so many different things, and everybody you talk to believes that they have an angle on what the story is, how you get in, what happens if you don't, what you didn't do. And I will just say that none of that's true. One, every year is a different year. Every student is unique in their experience and what they bring. And I think, again, that is the beauty of the space that we're in, this commitment to holistic review. Now, there are other big, large colleges and universities here in the United States who do not practice holistic review, where it's very much objective, you put it into a formula and you spit it out, but we don't do that here. So let me just say that. I think the other thing, and Dean Solomon talked about traveling the world, and I look forward to doing that for the University of Michigan and meet you all and meet your students. When I've traveled before and been, there was mention earlier of Mumbai and street food, and I remember my visits there, and I've been to China, South America, many places. And what I've discovered is that the same concerns that you have for your students are the same questions and concerns that we get from US parents every day. Everybody just really wants to do the best to guide their students to figure out, can they help them achieve their dreams? And so we are not looking at applications and lining them up and say, these students are from Hong Kong and we only want 2 and let me pick these 2, or it's random. It really is looking holistically. It's thinking about maybe what major they may be looking at. Director Sanders and I had an opportunity to talk with some of our colleagues from dance and theater and music just yesterday, and they were talking about the competitive process and that they may only need 1 oboe player in a year. So that would factor in. That has nothing to do with your country of origin. So there are a lot of other factors, and this really speaks to something that I think is important for you to think about in guiding your students, is the research and the sort of digging in to understand what is expected, what's required, what might be different sort of trends that might be happening in one major or another major, the number of applications, how a student has prepared. So there's so many things that factors in. And so really, what can the student do? The student can continue to thrive, pursue excellence, like Dean Solomon mentioned. We're going to talk, I think, a little bit more about how a student can showcase their own gifts and talents. But in the global space, I want to also just say we are committed to enrolling students with a range of experiences, a range of backgrounds, because we believe that enriches the learning environment here. And just to put it in perspective, with this incoming class, the class of 2021, we welcomed 7,290 first-year new students. We welcomed 1,407 new transfer students. And of that group, we welcomed 944 new students from throughout the world, representing 73 countries. They were at 269 different high schools and 66 different colleges and universities. So it just speaks to, we're bringing in students from around the world with a range of backgrounds and experiences as first-year students and transfer students, and we really appreciate the diversity that they bring to our community.
Thank you. You've highlighted really talking about students distinguishing themselves in the process. And again, I think that's something that most of the questions, many of the questions that were submitted really focused on a concern about how their students, given the volumes of applications, the interest in trying to shape a class, what's most important? Is it that letter of recommendation? Is it visiting campus, trying to fly to Ann Arbor in order to be able to make a contact here? What can students do to distinguish themselves in this process that really will help to impact their application submission? Someone mentioned alumni ties. As we've indicated, really with the largest volume of alumni in the world, we value those relationships, but we also recognize we would fill the entire class if we gave consideration to those with alumni ties. So that experience, though valuable, isn't a part of the admissions process. So can you each speak to really what's most important? Is it that letter of recommendation? Is it trying to contact an individual department? I'm certain that looks very different at the graduate than at the undergraduate level. Should they be trying to get research because they weren't able to do research last year? What's most important that they focus on? Is it purely looking at their grades that last year, unfortunately, may not have been their best year? So this year they really need to focus on the grades. And again, with this range of things that I'm actually asking you, that provides quite a wide variety of things that students could consider as they need to focus. So let's start with Vice Provost Brumfield.
That's a really hard question because you just asked me to point out one thing, and I don't think I can say that because there are a lot of things that are important. And you've mentioned so many of them. So maybe let me highlight a couple of things. And I'm going to go back to my point about research. And so doing the research is really important. And part of that research, I think, for you as for students who have alumni as parents, is for your students to really talk to you about their experience, your experience, for them to really learn about why was that experience important to you? Why did it move you? How then might they think about their own aspirations, and how might them help them to better understand the university and whether we might be a good fit for them? Because I hate to say it, sometimes parents think it's a good fit, but the students have their own mind and they want something else. But in talking to you and really having great family conversations, I think that that can illuminate things for students. I think the other thing that is really important is for students to learn to be confident in talking in their own voice, that their experiences are unique, that they don't have to, be a synchronized skater, and have some sort of high acclaim within the country to be someone who is worthy and who's valuable and who has a voice that matters. And so I think that that's the thing that I want to just really highlight and reiterate, that I want you to encourage your students to speak with their voice. Director Sanders and her team, they're very skilled. So they know the difference in a student's voice and a parent's helping voice. So how do we encourage our students to really speak and tell their story in their own way, whatever it is? And I think that that's something that really resonates.
Thank you. Dean Solomon?
Yes, thanks. I think that's just a few things to add on in the graduate space. I think what I also will find it challenging to have one thing, and I'll begin with, there's an additional piece in the graduate space that now you have your undergraduate experience and you're, in some sense, proposing a specialization. And so the admissions process now is often within a program, within a department, or within a college. And so there's an element of fit there. And so when you think about what is really important, there's a bit of stepping forward into why is that the degree for you? Like why is that the fit in terms of your educational goals, in terms of the way in which you'd like to contribute through your career? That's really important. And I think if that is centered, then some of the other things, like how should I prepare for that pathway? Do I need to do an internship? Should I be thinking about getting some research experience? Which faculty members now should I talk to learn more about that program? Who should I be talking to understand what is the best fit for me? I would center those kinds of questions to answer, and then some of the steps to take will follow naturally from that. And I guess the other piece I would add to that is that there is an element of time there. And it can be helpful to be thinking about these directions, a year or two before actually making the application. And to maybe be frank, sometimes that means that degree experience should not happen immediately after undergraduate. And there's a possibility that, in the final year of undergraduate studies, there's an additional experience, an internship, some kind of nonprofit work that would really make the bridge into that degree program in a way that is going to make it even more meaningful for the applicant. And so I would just add in the graduate space, there's much more to bring to bear, and how the student is thinking about why they want to pursue that program as being something to reflect upon. Thanks.
Thank you. You both mentioned a little bit earlier information about international students, our campus community, and certainly, Dean Solomon, you mentioned some of the things that were provided internationally to help provide community for students who weren't able to make it to campus. And many of you are likely aware, who are attending today's session, that there was great partnership with institutions around the world that allowed many of our students to use classrooms and provided community for students who weren't able to make it to campus. but we also know community is really important, how students find that group of students that they connect with. And certainly this fall, what we've noticed across the board is that students are craving that interaction. They're attending more events, they're coming early, and they're staying longer. And so just a question for both of you regarding, kind of that forecasting of student engagement, and what did that look like this year, given the restart? I know we were all craving and excited to see them come back, as certainly being able to engage with them virtually was not optimal for any of us, and certainly we're excited. So we'll start with Dean Solomon.
Thank you. I think this year there's been a real thirst for student engagement, as you mentioned, and I feel like the wheels have started turning a little bit slowly. So just to give a specific example, Rackham Student Government, so one of our kind of central organizations that we work with to understand, the experience of graduate students and what they would like, and they also are a source of community that extends outside the department. We've had virtual meetings all through the pandemic, and those have been essential. Like, we have learned so much about what the needs of students were through those virtual engagements, but at the end of the day, they were still virtual. We had our first in-person gathering yesterday, and it was just lovely. It was really, really wonderful. But it is November, and so it's just taken us time to kind of walk into the level of comfort that we can all do these events, and they are very, very powerful. And so there's more of that. And I would say there's been a little bit of a delay. Like, I might have wanted to do these in September, but I think we're all walking into this, and we've actually just frankly all been so busy. We're moving into that space now. To turn to international students, just briefly, I would, or maybe even, and this is still a little bit general to graduate. I think there's two places to find community, and University of Michigan is well set up in both spaces. So one is within the department, like within the degree program. This is important because these students share common, academic experiences, common research experiences. And so I would really always forefront that. And every department has a graduate student organization that is a source of peer mentoring, connections across cohorts. So like a second year student and a first year student can learn from each other in really powerful ways. International and domestic students can also learn from each other, and that's very important. And then the second piece would be the fellowship and community that you can find outside your program. And here I would just use Rackham Graduate International, like the Rackham International Student Organization, as an alternative where you can find additional community. And I would say across the university, I've just given the example of one organization. There are many organizations where you can find your voice. Some of them are around by nationality, organizations that are organized by nationality, but some of them are around career interests, and there's going to be a place to find that additional community outside the department. And I would always recommend that these are two sources for students to consider.
Thank you, Dean Solomon. Vice Provost Brumfield?
Sure, just adding a few things. You mentioned that I'm new to campus, so I've only been here since August 2nd. And I've enjoyed getting to know campus, and it was a stark difference my first couple of weeks and then students arriving. And so I will echo what Dean Solomon said. When students came to campus, they were just out and about everywhere. You could tell that they were excited to be back in community, excited to see their classmates, especially those who needed to stay abroad for a year and then join us here this year due to the pandemic. One of the first activities I had an opportunity to participate in was convocation, and was able to address thousands of new students. And it was a hot day. I tell you, I almost thought I was going to pass out, and that would not have been a good first look. But just seeing our new students, they were just thrilled to be on campus. And so that really got things started. I had an opportunity with Director Sanders to volunteer during move-in, and we were in one of the residence halls, and just seeing the excitement and parents, almost excitement but relief that they were leaving their students here on campus. I've had a chance to go to football games. I've been to a hockey game, haven't made it to basketball yet, but in these spaces, the students are there, they're excited. They may be masked up, they have their masks, so we're expected to have masks on indoors, but that's not stopping students from having a full experience. I see students, we have some who work in our office, and I'm just thrilled. I'm thrilled with what I'm seeing. I'm thrilled with the energy, the excitement. And so in some ways, things are really back to normal, despite the pandemic, because there's just this thirst and hunger. And as we think about international students coming to our community, they're experiencing this just as any other student would. And so one of the things that I encourage, and I think this will be no problem since I'm talking to a group of alumni, is that your students are just active and involved right away from day one, to find the thing that matches their interests, because I think that helps enrich their experience, and certainly enriches experiences from our students from Michigan, from throughout the nation, and throughout the world. Again, I just think that the campus so far has just been alive, even though there was a bit of snow this week and last week.
Thank you. So I want to point out that we do have the ability to answer questions. If you'd like to place them in the Q&A, we'd really appreciate it. I think we've been able to clear all the questions that are there, but I know as we're wrapping up and coming to the conclusion of our time together, if you have questions that are still outstanding, please feel free to share them. So looking towards the horizon, if you had your crystal ball and you could forecast a little bit of what you see, certainly I think there was mention of world travel and engagement with students around the world. I think we're all getting used to that, in the thought of even traveling domestically again. What do you see on the horizon in terms of our engagement and our ability to really reactivate our engagement with students, whether that's domestically or internationally? And what did we learn? Because certainly I think it's programs like this that we're offering virtually and connecting with people around the world are some of what we would consider quick wins that were related to some of the bright spots of the silver linings of the pandemic, and how we're able to leverage and use technology to engage people from around the globe. So if you're able to briefly comment on that, and then we'll wrap up if there are no other questions. So we'll start with Vice Provost Brumfield.
So I can't imagine a world in the future that does not include some sort of virtual programming. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons learned, is that this platform allows us to expand our access, to touch people at many different times. I don't know what time zone you all are in right now, but really expanding our ability to share our story with students and families and influencers around the nation. I think that there will be continued discussion around credentials or testing, especially in highly selective admission spaces, places that have high volume. We're going to continue to think about those sorts of things, because the reality is we have so many gifted and talented students who want to be a part of our community, but there's just not enough space and capacity. So those conversations will continue. Things that I think, again, will remain the same is that students will be expected to do their best, to thrive within the spaces that they're in, to present their, whatever they can, to demonstrate their preparedness, as well as to speak to their aspirations. So, I think I'll just leave with that. Again, as much as things are different and disrupted, a lot of things are the same. And I think the future is quite bright.
Thank you. I think you mentioned within that just alternate pathways to completing and reaching students' goals. So that might be transfer considerations, a student that might start somewhere else and transfer to the institution, or if ultimately their goal is to receive a degree from the University of Michigan, perhaps their undergraduate degree is completed elsewhere and they transfer and join Dean Solomon in the graduate world. So certainly if the goal is an experience at the University of Michigan, there might be alternate pathways for students to consider achieving that same end result. Dean Solomon.
Thanks. I think that your conversation, the two of you, really addressed kind of what has been learned or what can be accomplished in the space of applying. Maybe to complement that, I'll just talk a little bit about what the student experience I think might look like here on campus. And so one thing to say is that it was remarkable how we continued and learned about what we could do in that moment of the pandemic. So all through the pandemic, except for a couple of months, our research enterprise degree progress for our master's and PhD students continued. The circumstances were difficult, but we found a way and we learned a lot from that. And this idea that there were things that we just never thought were possible, that when you have this capability of course, the in-person experience is central to the University of Michigan. We've got that back. We're delighted. And you can make more for that when you have these kind of selected virtual capabilities. I'll just mention lecture capture. So, take an engineering student that in their last year and they're out trying to find an internship, they're out interviewing. You got to make those, right? And what's going on with your classes? Well, with lecture capture, that kind of participation now is ensured in ways that we doubted before, and now we know that we can do. And so there's so many ways we don't even yet understand that this intersection of the format that we're in right now and being able to engage with you can be intersected with just the master in-person experience that we can offer at a residential school like the University of Michigan. And we can do even better when we can combine the two. And I think we'll be learning how to do that in all our spaces in the coming months and years. It'll be a long game. Thanks.
Thank you. So to just wrap up, we're reaching the end. In a minute or less for each of you, if you wouldn't mind providing really what you might think of as one piece of advice. I know that's really quick and short, so I will stop talking. Let's go with Vice Provost Brumfield.
Thanks. I'll give this advice to the families who are here. Be a support for your student. Be opening to listening, to really hearing what's on your student's mind, even if they're telling you things that you may not want to hear. I think it will help them make a good decision and help them better understand what is going to be a good collegiate place for them next year or in whatever year they happen to come our way.
Thank you. Dean Solomon?
Thanks. I would add so many goals and at the moment increasingly involve additional education and training, which is what really graduate and professional degrees are. So thinking about that as a possibility for students and thinking about that as early in the undergraduate career as it makes sense, and really going back to this idea about what do you want to do and what education is necessary for that. That is really a central piece. And I would just kind of throw in, when you think about it this way, there's multiple opportunities to be a University of Michigan student. We've talked about undergraduate, we've talked about graduate, we've talked about professional. Those are all different experiences. And so I've had the experience of multiple institutions in my career, and that's been really powerful. And that's something just to add at this moment as well. Thank you.
Thank you both so much for the information you've shared this morning. Hopefully this has answered many of the questions of our guests. And now I'd like to turn things back over to Steve Grafton to close out the program. Steve?
Well, thank you again, Erica, and really thanks to all three of you. It's interesting as I listened this morning and how you make this seem so simple, to be able to manage these things. But let me just make sure that all of our alumni understand that this is a huge challenge to be able to put together a class that not only recognizes the achievements and experiences and successes of high school students as they're looking to come to Michigan, or undergraduate students looking to go to graduate school. It's also important that we have classes that support each other, and that there be great diversity and differences of thought and different experiences, and that can be a challenge. The truth is that our admissions offices could fill up the classes several times over with qualified students from those who apply, and so finding that right mix that is best is the challenge. And I just want to tell you that the three people you've heard today and the teams that they work with come at this from a place not just of their obvious expertise. You can see that today, but what I want you to know, because I know them, I don't know Vice Provost Brumfield well yet, but I would tell you she wouldn't be here if Michigan weren't convinced that she carries these same traits of really caring about the students that are on campus now, and the ones that we're considering to be students in the future. And that's the most important thing. As alumni, you should feel very proud of the approach that the university takes on this front. They do an excellent job. And I know that many of you will be looking at that process from a personal standpoint. And I'm happy for those of you who are going to be happy about the result. I'm sad for those of you who might not, because not everyone can be admitted, but I certainly can commit to you that the process is a good one, and it will give your students and those you know every opportunity. So thanks again to these panelists for sharing all of these insights with us. Thanks to all of you for being here. We appreciate you. You continue to be the very best recruiting tools that the university has as you shine the Michigan light in your communities and in your workplaces, and you let others know that having a Michigan degree really does make a difference in the lives of those who have it and in the lives of everyone with whom they have contact. And so thank you, alumni, for being great ambassadors of our university. I wish I could be with all of you at your football watch parties over the next 2 weekends, because I know many of you will be gathering with other alumni to watch the end of our football season, which should be a good one. But just know that we are thinking about you. We're here for you. And if there's ever anything we can do to help you, that's what we're here for. So please call on us. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you all have a great evening or a great day, and go blue.